Hi students, in this lesson we'll cover what a style frame is, working with type, adding vector icons, applying color, and creating your design board. Okay, let's start with just setting up our file. You want to open Adobe Illustrator. Once you have it open, create a new file, and under Film and Video, you'll want to select HD TV 1080. And then under More Settings, go under Transparency Grid and turn that off and just hit Create Document. And now we want to set up a grid to work with, and that's pretty easy in Illustrator. You just go under View, Show Grid, and because we're working with pixel dimensions, I'm going to snap the grid and then also snap the pixel. And I don't like to have the white behind it here, so I'm going to actually delete Artboard 2. And now I'm set up to start to design our style frame. Okay, we have our file set up, and now we're ready to design our first style frame. So what is a style frame? A style frame is a single frame or an image that depicts the look and feel of a motion design project. Style frames are the visual representation of what a motion piece will look like prior to any animation. They are one of the primary outcomes and deliverables of design for motion. Style frames are important for a number of reasons. Most importantly, style frames help to win pitches for commercial projects. A single image can be the difference between a studio or designer winning a project or losing out to another design studio. Because style frames help win jobs, the designers who create them play an extremely important role in the design-driven productions. The Newsworthy project is really a type-driven or type-first project. So we really need to introduce the 4 typographic contrasts, and they're really the key to creating a good typographic hierarchy for your design. And these are pretty basic and they seem very obvious, but they're pretty challenging to put into practice consistently over and over again. So the first contrast is just simply size, creating variation within your design using size. The second is weight. Third is using either uppercase or lowercase. And last but not least, using a typeface like Universe and mixing it with maybe something like Bodoni. So being able to switch and mix typefaces. In our project, we'll be working with size, weight, and case, and then dependent on your faculty input, we may mix face in with that. It's just depending on each one of your designs. So let's put these 4 contrasts into practice, and let's start to work on our design. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is make sure I save my file. So use your username, the assignment number, design board, and we're working on version 1. Let's bring the grid back up. If I hit Command quotes, it can turn on and off the grid. And if I would like to bring my type palette up, so if I hit Command T, that'll bring the character palette up. And just want to make sure I show the options, which expands the palette. So if I hide them, it looks something like this. We just want to show all the options for working with type. And then the last thing I want to do before I start the design is actually I want to have reference to my sketch storyboard. So I'm going to go in and find that. Just hit place. And this is just for reference. So I'm going to put it off to the side. So in my design 500 and FEMA are the largest type, so I'm going to start with that key word again, which is going to be, or number, which is going to be 500. I'm just going to click down the type tool. I'm not going to actually draw a type box. If I draw a box, it's hard to scale, and it will actually wrap the type versus scale it. So we're going to set individual words and come in here, type 500. Now I'm going to work with one typeface and only one typeface. We're not going to mix them to get started because, I don't know, it can be challenging and also can kind of make a mess. So just to start, I'm going to work with Universe. Now I particularly like Universe because it has so many different weights to it. It gives me a lot of options to work with, and it's just a well-designed typeface. So I'm just going to set it in condensed bold to start with. Click on the type, hold Shift, and scale it up. It will snap the pixels and snap to the grid. And what I want to do is actually center it. So I have a crosshair here, but there's also another way to actually center your type on a design, and that's if you go to Window, select the Line palette, which you guys may have worked with before. Again, you want to open the Show Options, and this is a little trick you might not know. If I go Align to Artboard, and then I hit Center, it will actually align it centered. So again, it will snap it to the center of the artboard. When you're done snapping at the center, you'll want to make sure you go back to Align to Selection. So now I have a bold 500. Again, this is my key focal point for setting up a good piece of type. And I think I want to have it a little bit larger, maybe like 285. So it's really bold and large on the page. I'm just going to center it again. Now I'm going to be working with a justified piece of type. That means it will left and right align and make a nice block. Again, this is just an option or for your design. It doesn't mean that you have to choose to lay out the type this way. Again, it's just an example. So I have the 500 set. My next word is FEMA. So again, I'm just going to hit the type tool. It's going to set the type based on my previous selection. I'm going to work with all cap. I'm actually going to change the weight so it doesn't compete. So maybe like 125 to start with. And I'm going to use 55 Roman so it doesn't compete with the 500. So again, I can select both pieces of type, left align, and then all I want to do is scale up FEMA, zoom in. You can see that maybe a little bit smaller so it aligns with the 500. And that looks pretty good. So our next is personnel. And that's a longer word, so obviously we're going to have to make that smaller to start with. So if I hold Option and Shift, I can duplicate and keep my type aligned. Just type in personnel. Scale this down so it snaps. And set this to maybe 65 bold. So that looks pretty good. So we've discussed kerning, which is the spacing between the letters. And you can see that between E and M is a little bit wide. So I'll kern that back in and maybe, again, just a touch, scale it back up. Now we're going to talk about leading, and it's similar to kerning, where kerning is the horizontal space between each letter form. Leading is the vertical space between each word or sentence. So right now we can see that my vertical space or my leading between FEMA and 500 is very different than our FEMA and personnel. So to start off with, I would advise everybody to look at this spacing and make sure that it matches to start with. And then if you want to create a variation or emphasis by changing that leading, then work with, again, your faculty member to make the best choice. One of the tricky things sometimes is it snaps to pixel and grid where you honestly might have to turn it off to get it to align properly. So again, turning on and off the snap to grid and snap to pixel, sometimes you have to do that when it will not align properly. So now I have personnel set. I have operating and in response. So again, I'm just going to duplicate personnel, type in operating. I'm going to set this one to light and scale it up as well. And last but not least, in response. And I'm going to set this one at 75 black and scale it down. And you can see when I'm scaling, I'm holding shift so I don't distort the letters. Always make sure you're holding shift when you scale. You can see that this is snapping again, so I'll turn it off so I can get it to scale perfectly. Operating might have to come back up just a little bit. So use your grid, and remember you might have to turn it on and off. And you can see my spacing is off here, so I'm going to come back in. And tweak that. So now I have a pretty good piece of type. I might have to come in and tweak the kerning a little bit, but now I have a justified, centered, nicely designed piece of typography with good hierarchy. My focal point is 500 FEMA. And the last thing I just want to make sure everybody's using is I'm doing design in all caps. And the main reason we're using all caps is it makes a nice block of typography where the baseline and what they call the cap height have one consistent flow to them. So again, just to show you the difference, if I was to do personnel with FEMA here, what happens is it creates an irregular space because of the ascender, which is when it goes above the lowercase, or what they call X height. It goes above that line to the cap height, or a descender is when it goes below the baseline. So again, these create irregular shapes, and it makes it pretty challenging to work with a block of type. If this is something you want to work with, again, consult your faculty member, and it can work in certain scenarios, but for just setting a good block of text and practicing it, I recommend using all caps to start with, and then creating a variation with lowercase if you need to. So again, we just went through using size and different weight, and then set everything in all caps. Now we're ready to design our second style frame. So let's open the Artboards palette, and I'm going to zoom out here and add a new artboard. And just by adding an artboard, it's going to create the same 1920 by 1080. And I'm just going to build out all 6 of my style frames. If I hit Document, Edit Artboards, I'm going to move the fourth one down. And I'm going to continue to do the same. And add one last one. So now we're set up file-wise to design all 6 of our style frames. So if I look at my storyboard, thousands is my next keyword. This time I'm going to do a left align type study. I'm going to set this one at cadence 67 bold, which matches my 500. So each time I'm using a keyword, I'm setting it in the same type family and the same weight. So for thousands, it's 67 bold, like 500. And I'll set this at, let's say, 150 to start. That looks pretty good. So do the same again. If I hold Option and Shift, I can copy it. My next keyword is promising. Again, all caps. I'm going to scale this down so it doesn't compete. Set it at 55 Roman. Maybe 110. And I'll make sure, select both and left align. Next piece of type is of more workers. Just going to scale this one down again, holding Shift. Maybe a little smaller. And make sure I left align this one as well. And look at the spacing. This probably just needs to come up a little bit more. And set my last line, which is and ships of aid and supplies. Copy it again. Scale this down. I'm going to keep it at 55 still, and keep making this smaller. Looks something like this. And again, just make sure the spacing between these are equal. So now I've set my second piece of type. Make sure it's all left aligned, and you can mix between left and justified depending on what you want to do from a design standpoint. Again, I probably will come in here and tweak the kerning before final, but just trying to set it quickly to show you a second example. Again, the focal point is my keyword, setting it in 67 bold universe, and that is my focal point, and my other type responds size and weight to that keyword. For our newsworthy project, we're going to be specifically working with vector icons. We're going to use the vector icons in combination with our typography to design our style frames. And there's a fantastic resource out there called the Noun Project. On my first style frame, I have 500 female personnel. And I really would like to have a vector icon of the Puerto Rican flag. So if I search Puerto Rico flag, I have 11,639 icons to choose from. So again, you can see how this is a pretty amazing resource to have. And it also has a couple different options of how you can use it. We can use it web-based, and if I click the flag, I can download it. And we want to make sure that we use SVG, which is a scalable vector graphic. And again, it's vector-based, so it allows us to infinitely scale it without losing any resolution. If we use a PNG, again, we know that is a raster file, and we cannot scale it. So for this resource, if you're using the web-based version, make sure you always download the scalable vector graphic. On the Noun Project website, it has different apps that it works with. So it has a Mac-based download. So if you're using your laptop, you can use this nice little extension that allows me to search any type of icon that I'm looking for, and then simply drag and drop that into Illustrator, After Effects, Photoshop, InDesign. It also has extensions that you can download and apply. Now I know that it's not going to work on our desktop computers in the lab because they don't allow us to install anything like that. So these will specifically work on your laptop computer. So if I select the Puerto Rican flag, I can simply drag and drop as a vector file into Illustrator. I probably will scale this up a little bit so it matches the 500. Now again, the file comes where they're each designed a little bit differently, so I'm going to group this one and again align it left aligned with the 500. Scale it down just a little bit more. And now I have my vector icon integrated with my design. I'll probably center this again since I've added the flag on top. And the next one, vector icon I'd like to work with, is some marching workers. So if I jump back over to Noun Project, I get a pretty big list of different types of workers that I possibly could use. I found my workers. I'm going to select it, drag and drop. Now you can see how they're all separate shapes. I'm just going to group it, Command G, hold Shift, scale it up. And for right now, I'm going to make it similar size to my block of text. And I have a layout, a second style frame layout. And now I'm ready to add color. Now we're ready to apply color to our style frames. And there's a really fantastic resource for this. So again, we had the Noun Project for our icons. And now for color, we're going to use Adobe Color. And you want to go to color.adobe.com. Now I know some of you have maybe been introduced to this and some of you haven't, but we're going to go through how to connect this to Illustrator. So the first thing you want to do is sign in. And if you don't have an Adobe ID, all you have to do is click to get one. And that's pretty simple. You just sign up, it's free. And I'm just going to sign in here. And you have a couple options. You can create your own palette. You can explore different palettes, which is a huge resource. And then when you make your own palettes, you can also, or explore, you can save them to your own themes. So just want to go through the different types of palettes you can make and then create my own custom color palette. So first there's analogous, and that's just colors that are close together on the color wheel. There's monochromatic, which is a single hue with tints, shades, and tones. So remember, tints are when the color adds white to it. Shades are when black is added to the color, and tones are when gray is added to that color. There's triad, which splits the color wheel into thirds, and this usually creates a really high contrast color palette. There's complementary, which are directly across on the color wheel. There's compound, which is a combination of complementary and analogous. There's shades, which is a single color that adds either black or subtracts black. And then there's custom, which allows you to create your own palette. So each one of these that you select, you can change. So I'm going to create my own palette really quickly. I know it based on RGB numbers that I want to use. So the first one's a red. I'll kind of keep this darker version of that red. I want to create a blue. And a darker blue. And then lastly, I'll just use a black. So I want to save this palette. We'll call it Newsworthy. We'll add it to my library or even to colors. Let's just do my library and hit. And I don't want to publish this theme, so it's not public. And I'll hit save. Now if I jump over to Illustrator and open libraries, it'll update in my library under color themes, and you can see I have my Newsworthy palette right there ready to go. Now if you don't see your color palette in the color themes library here, you need to go under the help menu, and it should have a sign in, and if you hit sign in, you can then log into your Adobe account through Illustrator, and it'll make sure that it connects your color theme into the library. So now I'd like to make my color palette that is required for this project. So I'm just going to delete my storyboard. I'm going to hit Document Setup, Edit Artboards. Just going to draw a custom palette in the corner here for my color. And I want to draw my dominant color, which on this design will actually be white. So I'll make sure I put a black stroke on that. Now I want to work with my subordinate color, so I'll draw a box to the center point here. I'll take the stroke off that and bring my library back up, and my subordinate color will probably be the shade of blue. Then lastly, I'm going to draw my accent color. So I want to draw a square. Just make sure you hold shift so that it does the square proportionately, and my accent color will be the red. So now I've created my color palette that I can turn in as a JPEG. Now we're ready to apply color to our type and our vector icon. So I'm just going to select FEMA and color in red, and I'm going to select in response and put in the color blue. Zoom in to my flag. Now all these icons are again designed a little bit differently, so you got to kind of figure out how to edit them and add color to them. So for this example, if I double click inside, right now this is just a stroke shape, so I actually have to draw a triangle to fill this color. So just use the pen tool. Draw a triangle, and I'm going to fill it with the blue, and I'm going to send it to back with the Shift Command bracket, and I need to double click inside here and get this to fill white, which means I gotta cut and paste this in. And get it into its own layer. So I'll paste this now. So again, you kind of have to hack these a little bit to get them to work sometimes. So now I've pasted that object. And each one of these lines are just stroke lines. So if I want to add red in, I have to come in and draw a bar, select the red tone, and then again, Shift Command, left bracket to send to back. And I'm just going to hit Option and Shift and duplicate that. And now I've added color to my flag, and I'm going to do the same thing in my second style frame. Now my transition is probably going to zoom all the way into this blue of the flag. So the first thing I want to do is create a new layer, and I'm just going to call this my background. Drag and create a rectangle. Now that's filled with the red, and I actually want to use my blue and then lock my background layer. So each one of these characters going to come in and make my workers all white. So their bodies are going to be set at white, and their heads, I'm going to select the red tone. So I'm going to go through. If I hold Shift, I can select all of them and color them red. So again, I'm going to go outside the group. So if you don't have any experience with working with groups, again, I just kind of went over this quickly. If I double click my vector icon, it goes inside the grouping, and then I'm able to select each individual part and colorize it, and then I leave that group. So now I'm going to select all this type, promising of more workers and ships, change it from the black to a white tone, and then select thousands and set that at red. So now I've brought color to both my style frames, and I'm ready to finish the design of the last 4 of my style frames and add color to them. So what is a design board? A design board contains a sequence or collection of style frames that tell a narrative or a story. In many ways, they resemble the hand-drawn storyboards that you've created. What we want to do, before we finalize everything is recognize that the design that we've put together for this demo is just a suggestion on how you can approach working with type and vector icons. It's not the end-all be-all, and it's not the only way that you can approach putting your designs together. The choices that were made in this design are very clean and simple. One thing that I want everybody to remember is that every element that you add to your design should support the communication of your article. Remember that you're a designer and not a decorator. So all your choices have to support what your idea is and what the communication of the article is. So that being said, again, we're only using icon and typography in this example. If you wanted to add point, line, and plane, meaning adding extra lines to add hierarchy to your design, adding circles and squares to break up the shapes, you can do so, or even possibly working with different textures. Again, this is just a starting point. We're really working with flat color and design here. Work with your faculty member to add extra elements to your design. Okay, so let's move on to putting together our final design board. We have our color palette together and all 6 of our style frames completed. We want to go under Export, Export As, Use Artboards. I'm going to go to JPEG. You should have a newsworthy folder with design board. Inside that folder, I'm going to create a assets folder to put all of these JPEGs in. When I click use artboards, we can select all, or we can do arrange. So I'm just going to click all, hit export. Make sure the quality is maxed out. Let's go at 150 dpi, just so when we print them, they print out nicely. And type optimized, and hit OK. Okay, our last step is to put a final design board together. You'll download design board, InDesign file template from the course canvas. You'll make sure that you come in here, type in newsworthy for the project title, and put your name in down in the corner. And then we'll import our JPEGs. So if I click on number 1 here, do place or Command D, I'll go into my design board assets folder, select my first style frame, and hit open. And then under object, we want to do fit content proportionally, and it will fit our style frame into the frame, and this is proportional to the design that you've done. So then I'll Command D, do the second one, under object, fit content proportionally, do Command D, select my third one, Shift Command Option E will fit it proportionally. So Command D, Shift Option Command E to fit it. And the last one. If we look here, this last file will be your color palette. You'll want to rename it to your name, assignment 13, or whatever assignment number it is, and palette, and then version 1. So now my design board is ready. I'm just going to go under export, select JPEG. Make sure it's in my design board folder. Label it appropriately, then hit save. Range is only 1 or all because we only have one page. Put it at maximum quality. Baseline is fine. It says where we can make it at 150 dpi just in case we need to print it. And it still should be pretty small in size. And hit export. And now our JPEG has been created for our design board, and we have a JPEG for our color palette. And all you need to do is make sure that they're named appropriately, and upload them to your Google Drive for the assignment. Our lesson has now come to an end. We covered what a style frame is, working with type and the 4 typographic contrasts, adding vector icons, applying color to our style frames, and creating your design board. I wish you all the best of luck on your project, and happy designing.